Live. We are officially live. Oh, where did that go? Here, there, and there. Got it. There you go. What's that? What'd you do? Yeah, allow. Great. Thanks. I'm not functional. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our last story of transformation of the afternoon. I'm proud to introduce Colin Angevine and Josh Weiskraut. They're going to talk. And I thank you for the short titles. It's much easier for me to introduce. Steam isn't a big enough tent, period.
That's it. And we'll keep it safe. You're all tired at the end of the day. Hi everyone. We're going to start with a little introduction. I'm Colin. I'm the kind of overgrown, shaggy-haired one that people have been asking me today if I'm a student at VCU. I'm not. This is Josh, my stubbly, somewhat disgruntled colleague. Also pictured is Buck, the teacher at the independent school where we teach who's an institution of the school. He's taught every science class the school has offered in the last 30-something years. So our story of transformation is 3 years ago we started a STEAM program. And at this point we've officially outgrown the acronym. So we're going to tell our story of transformation, how we got to that point, and then what's next. When we started the STEAM program, it was 3 teachers doing this thing together. We were squatting in the physics teacher's classroom. We were siphoning funds from the digital media and photography budgets. And now we run a makerspace that's open to both middle and the upper school at the school in Philadelphia where we teach. So we're going to tell this story of transformation in 2 parts. First, we're going to tell you kind of the chronology of this transformation. We're going to tell that both with storytelling and satire. Make sure that like your sensors for our sarcasm should be on right now. And then after that, we want to talk about some of the lessons that we're taking away from it. But before we start into our story of transformation, we just want to give a little bit of context so that you understand kind of where we fit as secondary teachers at an event that's got mostly higher ed, and kind of where we fit into STEAM and what that is, and why it's worth having us all talk about it right now. So making in education is a really hot trend right now. You've heard the STEM buzzword from Obama in the State of the Union. You've heard maybe STEM getting a little bit more inclusive and becoming STEAM, spearheaded by RISD and others. Sometimes these programs are motivated by it's an uncertain job market and maybe this is what we need. Sometimes these programs are motivated by more interdisciplinary learning is what we need for our students. Either way, the maker movement in education is a juggernaut, and we see it pushing up in a way it typically doesn't. It is pushing itself towards higher ed a little bit more. And right now, the maker movement is being aligned with the STEM and STEAM thing that's happened. But we think there's something much, much bigger than that. And so that's where our lessons are kind of coming from. So a few years ago, we started this STEAM program. We've now outgrown the acronym. And our story starts with kids who ran out of road and wanted more. The kids who finished the physics classes with Buck that you just saw. It started with a little bit of team teaching between 3 teachers, and it started with a little bit of rogue scheduling to make it possible in our high school setting.
All right. So there were 8 11th and 12th graders that we started with, and then we started with this introduction that was a Venn diagram, and it was the 3 of us, Colin, myself, and an imaginary Buck with the sideways hair. We sat down, and on the first day, we introduced ourselves, even though the kids already knew us. They asked us to start this program with them. So I said, "Hi, I'm Josh, and I think every problem in the world can be solved by great design." I said, "And this is Colin, BC they call him. This is BC. He thinks every problem in the world can be solved by great code. And this is Buck, and he thinks every problem in the world can be solved by great engineering. And all 3 of us are wrong. because it takes all of these things and there's no single lens that can solve any great problem. And we were so sure that we had this all figured out. We were just going to combine these things. This kind of TEA, not necessarily science and math. They're too broad. But we got it. Technology, engineering, and art in the form of design. That's what we're going to do. We're going to solve some problems. So we were right about the single lens thing. We had no idea how big it was actually going to get at that point. How sort of all-encompassing the vision of learning that we're kind of stepping into is about to become. It was so much bigger than technology or engineering or art or even just problem solving. But that was our Venn diagram to start out. So we started, we called it an uncourse. We met like in a regular classroom. We met every day, totally voluntarily. They weren't getting course credit for it. We weren't getting paid for it. No one was getting grades for it. And yet we treated it like a class. So the first lesson unit in our class, we started with design. We started with design thinking. That's very buzzy. Why did we start with that? Because my background's in design, and I had gone to an education conference where somebody was like, design thinking in the classroom, do it. And I was like, that's pretty cool, let's do it. It's really important. This is how we solve problems now. That's kind of the design thinking. Comes out of IDEO, if you aren't familiar with it. It's sort of a process that involves, often it's associated with human-centered design. We do a lot of research, we talk to a lot of people, we interview people. The design group is often not just designers. In fact, it's always not just designers. People who have insight into the problem being solved. And the reality is it's actually a really great process, and it is great for kids to learn it, but it's not the whole picture. So the challenge was, they walked in, so the first day we introduced, the second day they walked in and we had a chair on the table. Now these are the chairs in our science building. The kids hate them. I mean, the teachers hate them, we all hate them. I mean, look at this chair. You can probably tell some of the issues. So the project prompt, do you like this chair? The answer, of course, from all the kids is no. Okay, fix it, right? Design me a better chair. Let's identify the problems. The front of the seat slopes down, so you just kind of slide right off it. It's hard, it has no padding, it has no friction. That metal footrest thing on all of the chairs are broken and just rattle around. You can actually try to rest your feet on it, it just jangles all through class. What do we do with our backpack? They're unstable, they tip over. Basically what the kids really wanted is this, but we don't have that much money to throw at Steelcase. And what, they start going through this process. This is kind of an easy challenge, right? This chair is like one of the worst pieces of design I think I've ever seen. It's very aesthetic. It's got this whole Scandinavian thing, whatever. At one point this thing gets to, they're like, well, yeah, but another problem is like these tables we sit at. They're too high, they're not really deep enough. We have all this stuff, you can't put it on the table. It's still not like in order. What do we, put our backpack somewhere here? Then they started like, well, let's redesign the tables and chairs together. Well, but what about the rest of the classroom? Why do we need tables and chairs? What are we doing? Right? And it's just started growing. We kind of thought that might happen, but we're just sitting back and watching it. And so, why do we need desks? Where do we put our stuff? Why do we have all this stuff? Why does it matter if the tables are too small? If we have less stuff, we don't need the bigger table. Why do what's all this about? What's the whole school thing about, really? Now we're in day 3. So they just couldn't stop. They redesigned the classroom, then they redesigned the need for the classroom, and they redesigned the whole school building, and then they redesigned the whole school institution. And that's about a week. There were touch screens everywhere, at least in their minds. Kind of like here. That was kind of our plan for the whole year. We were like, we're going to get to that point in such a year. It took us a week. Design thinking is really important. Just a tiny, tiny piece of why this type of learning is really important on the whole. So we finished Unit 1, which was kind of the whole course, in 1 week. And so we said, well, what's the next thing we can do? Let's build a robot, because that's what we're supposed to do, right? We build robots now. Because everybody in the future workforce that no one can define will be building robots. At least that's what I'm told. So we gave them a robotics challenge. The robotics challenge was kind of the Mars rover. So we took an easy one, right? Build the Mars rover. Built as a robot that we can throw off the 3-story roof of the science building. It's going to land safely. It's going to navigate 50 yards-ish to a particular spot in the field, and then it's going to plant a flag. And you get to design the flag too. That was it. So they went for it. Here's the launch. They designed the parachute, built the parachute, they went through a couple of iterations. Yeah, so it landed. The reason why the video ends there, it didn't drop. So that was, we got it to successfully sort of survive a landing. Then they spent a week repairing the axles that broke when it hit the ground because the parachute design turns out, even after the third iteration, still wasn't that great. Then with the fixed axles, we did get it to drive 50 yards. Didn't actually plant the flag. Eventually we got to plant the flag, or at least basically like fire a javelin at a tree. Yeah. So anyway, the Mars rover, the 3-part challenge, land safely, navigate to a point, plant a flag. Our giant metal falling from the sky, rat trap powered javelin launching machine never really completed the challenge, and yet that's okay. None of that really mattered. The kids learned a lot about robots. They learned a lot about facing really, really challenging problems. I don't think any of us thought they were actually going to even get this close to accomplishing it when we kind of put it in front of them because we wanted to see what was going to happen. They learned about iterating and rapid prototyping and development cycle. It was another one of those they couldn't stop. This one was the opposite. With the chair, they couldn't stop, and they kind of got to the end of as far as they could with the process, and much shorter than we thought. And this one they couldn't stop, and this thing that we thought we'd spend a couple weeks on, they continued working on almost to the whole year, even when we were working on lots of other projects. We're like, all right, we're done with the project. They're like, no, we're gonna make this work. We're gonna keep trying it. We got some time. We're gonna do this. So they couldn't stop in a totally different way, even though, they kind of got it to work in pieces. We knew the problems. We knew, they just wouldn't stop. And so they learned a lot of stuff. They learned a lot of stuff, not just that, but things that we can't necessarily like put into these sort of discursive academic ideas, the very embodied knowledge of working and building machines. What do we do about that? And I'll go back to, we didn't have to grade. So I'll just leave that one there. Haven't solved that problem yet if we did have to grade. How do we assess that? I know they learned a lot, but the robot didn't do the thing, so did they fail? Or, I don't know, is that a C? So that's something that sort of came out of this. That's a challenge. We had a structure that allowed us to ignore that challenge in this particular context. I'm not here to give you an answer to what you do when you don't have that structure that allows you to ignore that challenge. Anyway, we solved problems, we built machines, we rapidly prototyped. All of that stuff is really important. Still, just a fraction of why making is an important tool for learning.
So we started with design thinking, then we moved on to robotics and the physics and the programming that was involved in all of this. And this challenge was actually pretty prescriptive. We said it has to do this, then it's supposed to do that, then it's supposed to do that, and we were missing something. So we tried to access the other side of the brain. So our next challenge.
No, don't play again. I got it.
So next up, what's the thing that we're missing? We wanted to add art. We were missing something about creativity. And so why add creativity? Well, maybe it's because Sir Ken Robinson told us to, and everybody's seen that TED Talk, right? The schools are killing creativity. Okay, so maybe that's what we need. So instead of the robot mission, our challenge for this project was way more open-ended, and we guided them a little bit. But their challenge was, in the 3 days before winter break, give a gift to the school. So what that turned into was a musical staircase. And And on the first day of this public installation, it was right in the middle of the staircase that's in the lobby of the science building. It was, you know, the students were itching to go on spring break, and then they were walking down the stairs to their class, and how unexpected, right? So it somehow just created this feeling of joy, and it was tapping into, they were still wiring together and programming this thing that was leading them down interesting computer science and engineering sort of concepts. But figuring out what scale should the notes be, and what kind of experience do we want to design for people. We were getting a chance to pull that in.
I don't know what's the plan when it wants to skip slides. Please the mouse.
So that was something. And this, I mean, maybe you've seen something like this before. We were actually using a Makey to make this work. It's this amazing little $40 device made by Eric Rosenbaum and Jay Silver out of the MIT Media Lab. It's kind of a plug-and-play sort of thing. So I think the place where real creativity came in was on the third day of the installation. Instead of just having 8 different notes on one staircase, they used 2 Makey-Makeys. They reprogrammed the firmware on one of them. So all of a sudden, the engineering side of that stepped up in a really surprising way. And at the same time, they made their own arrangement of the Carol of the Bells in 16 parts. So it went from just notes on one staircase turned into this.
This might go on for a while. Let's give it. All right, did you do more to say about that?
No, go for it.
All right, great. Anyway, that goes on for a while. So then now we're in the second half of the year. At this point, we were working on actually all of these things kind of at the same time. Was after, like I said, they kept working on the robot. We did that in December, you know, really around the holidays. At some point, we were, you know, just working on other ideas, and the kids started to think about, hey, it's really cool. We come in, we brainstorm, we have all these ideas, we do all this great stuff, work together for 40 minutes a day, and then we leave, and we still keep having these ideas, but we can't keep talking about them as easily, and like we find things and we send them via email, but like high school kids don't actually check email anymore, and you know, so group texting not the best way to like send like massive amounts of resources to each other and all of that stuff, and like Pinterest now, nothing works, right? Nothing had like what we needed. We want to combine ideas, we want to do all this. So they started coming up with this idea for an app that would sort of be kind of like a Pinterest, but for design thinking and ideating, these sorts of things. And so cool, an innovative app about innovation. Let's design that. And just so happened, the technology director at the school sent us information about a design challenge that the Verizon Foundation was having, a big national app design competition about build an app for STEM learning. And we were like, no, we're already working on one of those. So let's enter this thing. You know, we were at no point where we were like, we're going to enter contests. We're going to do it. You know, we're not going to. It was never, we're going to build the robots. We're going to enter the contest. We're going to win the contest. We're going to build more robots. Right? That's a lot of the programs. We're like, sure, we'll send them something. What do they need? Oh, they need a video. Cool. We don't actually have to build the app. So where I'm going with this, we won this national competition. We had like the big novelty check on the stage. It was pretty cool. we got a lot of buy-in. And with that buy-in came these really weird expectations. They're probably not actually that weird based on, we were calling this program STEAM, and we built this app and we won this STEM competition and all of this stuff. And so now, all of a sudden, this expectation that we have this amazing, innovative engineering and entrepreneurship program, just kind of dissonant with what we actually were doing, or what felt like we were doing. But it sure got a lot of buy-in from other teachers, administrators, board of trustees, people with money, those sorts of things, which was great. I mean, the program took off, and now it was loaded with all of this stuff, which you'll find kind of funny when you see the cut paper stop motion video that actually won us this giant national STEM competition. The theme song and everything. And so actually after we won this contest, the big check was actually to help us find mentors and develop it. So they did actually end up programming a large portion of this, and it even turned into, after they graduated, they were coming back for a year, having meetings periodically to like figure out if they could actually like make this and turn it into a business and the whole thing. So it was more than just the cut paper stop motion, although that is a pretty simple, accessible way to design an app. Thinking about how do I do
Great way to
this.
explain it.
Yeah. So we are obviously interested in, innovative, creative products and coding, and all of that stuff is important, but again, just a small fraction of why the bigger piece of educational making is such a vital tool for learning.
So the tension that I hope that you're seeing at this point is we're kind of riding this fad, and we're doing some successful things. And this project, for example, when I teach computer science classes, it was great to see the kinds of programming that students were doing to actually build this thing. And for the media and photography classes that Josh teaches sometimes, it was great for him to see the kind of visual design and filmmaking that they were doing for this sort of thing. But that tension again is what's the learning that we want to create for our students, and how much of it do we just need to capitalize on the fads that are happening out there right now? So hey, maybe this is the next fad, because I'm not sure if anybody really knows what social entrepreneurship is, or if that's just again, like a useful buzzword that can leverage you into the next thing. So for us, this meant that maybe it's a blend of design thinking and service to the community. Maybe it's not just asking students to solve problems, but inviting students to define the problems and then having them solve those problems. So on the next slide, there's one really simple example of it. This is what the cafeteria looks like during assembly. And in some ways, this is a really great thing that the school community kind of is so trusting that the kids all just dump their book bags and it's not a problem for anybody. But then again, sometimes it is a problem because there's a terrible traffic jam when they're all coming out of the assembly at the same time, and then they can't find their bag under somebody else's bag. So maybe we can enlist the students in having them define the problems and not just solve the problems. So maybe social entrepreneurship is one way for us to think about framing and situating the kind of learning experiences that we want kids to take away. But even though that could be great and solving problems for the common good can be really meaningful, that's still just one slice of the bigger picture that we're looking for. But doing all of this gave us enough momentum that this is now our third year of running a STEAM program, and it's our first year of running a makerspace. So this is kind of another major part in our transformation, in that we started a makerspace this year. So somewhat similar to the thing that you might have seen down the hall. We have fewer toys, but we're okay with that. The makerspace, you can kind of think of like a library on campus, and as a community resource. We have informal programming that we offer. We're trying to build community in what we do. We have classes come in, we do projects with classes. It's not just the resource closet where that's where the 3D printer lives and that's where the high-tech stuff lives. And in fact, we really try to be intentional about how we organize the physical space so that the sewing machine is actually right next to the soldering iron, so that the kid who comes in knowing how to use the sewing machine and the kid who comes in knowing how to use the soldering iron will be side by side, and maybe something will emerge from that. And over on the other side of the classroom, all of the Arduinos and microcontrollers are right next to the googly eyes and the pipe cleaners. And that by juxtaposing these things, maybe that's where something more can emerge. So by building our STEAM program and getting to the place where now we have a physical space on campus to call home, a lot had changed for us. And now with a physical space, we have 4 different ways to work with students and teachers. So we still run our uncourse, this hybrid. Is it a formal class? Is it informal learning? What is it? Whatever it is, we still do that. We run workshops for lower schoolers and parents, and middle schoolers drop in during lunchtime when they want to. So anytime the door is open, you're welcome to come in addition to these kind of structured workshop experiences. And then the last way we work with other teachers and students is through formal classes, when we work with a teacher and collaborate a project, and the whole class comes in for a few class periods or for a week or a few times a week over the course of a month to work on a project. So maybe this is one way that you can think of our transformation. Sarcasm meter running high. So there was a whole lot of growth happening here, right? We were suddenly working with more and more disciplines. What started with just 3 teachers, now we've worked with, I don't know how many teachers over the course of the year with the makerspace. We started only working with 11th and 12th graders, and now we've got a flock of 7th graders that drop in every single day during lunch. We started by just squatting in the physics teacher's classroom and siphoning funds, and now there's a program with a space, and there's momentum towards something else. So with all of this growth, and with your suspicion of graphs that look like this, what's next, right? What's the next logical place for this to grow? Josh?
So we pretty much exhausted all of our science lessons. So we had to bring somebody new in. We had, STEAM already encompasses such a huge swath of academia. You've got the science people, the math people, you've got the art people, you've got the technology and the engineering people, right? What's left? The book people, right? So the humanities people, the humanities teachers. And so we really focused this year, opening the Makerspace, on doing a lot of work, a lot of collaborative projects with literature, history, and foreign language classes in the Makerspace, like this. So what I want to present to you, the newest trendlet in experiential education. It's like Seymour Papert ate Jean Piaget and cracked out a golden statue of John Dewey. Just when you thought STEAM had all the disciplines you could ever fit into one acronymized non-subject. Because just saying, let's do all the subjects traditionally found in a K-12 curriculum doesn't sound very catchy. Because STEAM or STREAM or STREAM or whatever else somebody can come up with just sounds silly. I give you the newest, most all-encompassing, interdisciplinary to the max. There's literally no more subjects to put in this acronym. Ladies and gentlemen, SHAM. It's what's next. Colin will explain a little bit more about SHAM.
So, listen, at the low, low cost of your tenure, you can hop on the bandwagon. And at the ground floor, we've got great things to offer, such as the transformative teaching technique of the bait and switch, a classic. The pyramid scheme, if you haven't tried that, you really should. Or what we've been doing at least, identity drop. We're so glad that you actually laughed. Because, well, it turns out that we're also actually kind of serious. The bait and switch is absolutely something that happens in the Makerspace with us. When a student comes in and has a great idea for a whatever, and I'm so glad that you have a great idea for whatever, let's make that thing together. I don't really care about the whatever, right? What I care about is the learning and what goes into it and the experience that you pull out of it, right? Project A doesn't really matter and project B doesn't really matter, but the slope between them does. The pyramid scheme. We were talking yesterday in one of the breakout sessions about the vulnerability of learning things, especially when you're the teacher in the room. Employ the pyramid scheme when you get the students to teach the students to teach the students to teach you. Kind of works out. It's great. Or identity fraud. Another one that we were talking about yesterday was how poisonous it is when someone says, "I'm not a math person." Right? My background is in classics as much as it is computer science. Josh's background is in
set design
as much as it is media production. So when people come to us as the math and science guys, you gotta run with it and you have to find some way to learn your way into it. So as much as we'd like to kind of mock ourselves and the fad chasing that turned out to be really productive. Even these things, you can flip them and leverage them into creating meaningful experiences for kids. So without the same kind of sarcasm and salesmanship, I want to go back to some of the projects that we just glanced over. Because the boy on the right there was actually one of our favorite success stories of a project this year. We were working with a 9th grade English class. And what we were doing was essentially exploring metaphor by building them with our hands, which is a really powerful way to think of things. If you're interested in more, I mean, we can both rant about it. Also, work coming from Matt Ratto out of the University of Toronto. He calls it critical making. It's kind of housed in the enthusiasm for digital humanities right now. Part of what we were doing as teachers with that project was challenging the false dichotomy between discursive knowledge and embodied knowledge. and seeing if one can speak to the other, and seeing if we can do that with students who are 14 years old.
Then we did it with students who were 12.
Yeah, and then we did it with 7th graders. Or the project on the left is also one of my favorites this year. An 11th grade girl came up to me and she had seen something on Pinterest. She wanted to design jewelry and print it with a 3D printer. So we spent weeks working on this thing together, and we wrote a program that would record audio, take the waveform of that audio, and then extrude it into a 3D geometry, which we could then print. So that thing on the left that's one half, there's another half, you stick them together, you wear it around your neck, and that particular one is Naomi saying the word makerspace. But what she really wanted is she wants to be able to go to her significant other, record her own voice saying, I love you, and give this to a person that she cares about. And not only are you doing some really incredible programming to deal with 100,000 data points and then map that into 3-dimensional geometry and then figure out the aesthetics of how do you want to design that in a way that someone would want to wear it around their neck, right? But then thinking about what does that mean that I'm holding something that's entirely unique to me and now I can hand it to you. So all of this leads to our idea that it's not just adding more stuff. That's not good enough. And so if you haven't heard of this enthusiasm of the maker movement in education yet, you will. And be suspicious of the fact that right now that's being aligned with STEM or STEAM, or yes, we've actually heard STEAM. Or maybe it's gonna sound more like sham at some point. Who knows, right? Because the bigger picture that we want you to see looks a little bit more like this. So maybe STEAM is something that gets to combine a few different disciplines, or maybe there's something a little bit bigger, but the thing that we really want to be thinking about, the thing that we want to show kids that we care about, is this much bigger thing of learning. Josh?
So I'm super cognizant of time right now, so I'm just gonna flash this up there. And this is probably good, because so we're not interested in disciplines, what we're interested in is learning theories. This is sort of our progression of learning theory, or a timeline of learning theories that sort of feed into what we're doing. Starts with Dewey, sort of granddaddy of experiential education, right? We need to embody this knowledge, we can. Piaget, which I'm gonna breeze through so the psychology professor doesn't trash me. But basically we construct knowledge structures, we take bits of information, we put them together, and we don't just receive in toto what is fed to us. Papert, sort of a disciple of Piaget, comes along in the 70s and 80s and says, yes, that constructivist thing is really cool. My subset of that, I'm really going to focus on how we build those knowledge structures by building shareable artifacts. And that's constructionism, which oftentimes people confuse or conflate. Constructivism, kind of the big tent, constructionism lives inside it, and that's what the makerspace focuses on. So I've had like an English teacher says, well, in my English classroom, we make papers and we construct knowledge by discussing things. And I'm like, yes, it's constructivist. And the makerspace is constructionist, and that's the sort of difference there. But really, it all falls under that Piaget umbrella, and I'm gonna move, that's as fast as anybody could ever explain that, and sorry, it's not.
So if that's a really quick glance at the learning theory and the way that we like to think of this, and we're putting away STEAM or sham or whatever it happens to be. We're moving away from disciplines, and we have 3 values that we want to be with: agency, authenticity, and audience. We think that those 3 values are the things that all of the projects that we've done and all of the work that we do really orbits around. So, agency.
And so sort of the guiding question on agency, what do you make? You know, own it, tell me about it, what is it, understand it. And we have sort of the more complex we're being, and this is sort of where we push teachers when we're working with, when the English teacher comes to us or the science teacher or whoever, you know, is the project that you're coming to us with, is it going to allow, you know, so they're going to have their content and curricular goals, and we're going to have our programmatic goals, which are aligned around these 3 values. So we're going to ask, in this project, do students feel valued for their talents? to take intellectual risks, to determine their own good for this project.
And I think that's worth commenting on, that agency can be, I get to choose what my project is. Agency goes to a different place when I actually know when my project is good enough. And I don't have to wait for you, the authority, to tell me.
Very cool stuff on agency and making shop classes soulcraft. If you ever read that book, it talks a lot about individual agency over our things.
So the second question that we ask students, the first one is, what are you making? Next up, why are you making it? And again, when we're trying to work with faculty, we're trying to figure out, does the project ring true with what's real to students?
I'm just gonna keep moving fast as we're.
Sure.
An audience. The guiding question, who is it for? And I think it's not always necessary to know that going in, but part of the critical process is developing that, right? And sometimes the answer is it's for me. Sometimes the answer is it's for the world. Oftentimes in school, the answer is it's for the teacher, right? And I think that's the one thing we're trying to push away from. But I think it's also helps to build that agency for them to know that there's not just an audience, but the sort of buzzy term of authentic audience, right? Is there an audience that actually wants us outside of a classroom context, academic context? Can I be producing this for someone else, usually who's out there, and make something that's worthy of that?
So we've kind of had this long form transformation, and we've been riding this tidal wave of momentum, which has been great and positive and useful. And I think it's great that we're actually able to now make fun of ourselves for the way that we've been able to get to this place. And I think we can distill it to these three things that we really care about when we're trying to shape learning experiences for students. And past that, most of it's kind of just marketing.
Yeah. And so, in the end, all of those buzzy things, the innovation and the design thinking, they're all really useful. They're all important. They're important things for people to have in their toolkit. They're important things for selling programs. And it's important to just know about them because they are really buzzy in K-12 right now, and mostly higher ed people. This is what kids. I mean, we're in one of these sort of like very elite prep schools, but really starting to spread across the gamut. This is a trend. They're coming to you, right? And they're going to have this, and they're going to have it in one context or another. And it's not always going to be our context. Sometimes it's going to be that very, we build robots for NASA context. And sometimes it's going to be, we do design thinking because it changes the world, and for the common good. Sometimes it's going to be all of the above, some of the above, but I think this is a pretty broad overview. I think the important thing is all of those sort of packages is the hype, and but what's inside is still really important. And that's it, right?
That's it. Thank you.
So yeah, so that's our final point. The tent isn't big enough. Don't build a bigger tent. Just bring the tent. Questions? We've got 3 minutes.
3 minutes, easy question. Good. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. I'm sorry I missed this part, but I'm glad to see what I saw. So, thank you.
You came in for the best part.
That was beautiful. I loved that. That was
The next time we do this, I'm gonna get like a green belt suit with like LEDs and like all boxed throughout.